Hello.
Kasi isang araw yan pagka...
Okay, so just to let all of you know, the decision is actually 280 plus pages. So I wasn't able to go through all of them because it was very detailed in terms of discussing each witness and the criticisms of each witness and the rebuttals of each witness. And then of course the court had to make its own assessment. So in broad strokes, I will present the issues presented in the case and the resolution of the court. So this is a case in Canada, a transfer pricing case in Canada. And the parties are, next slide please, CEL, which is a fully owned Swiss subsidiary of Cameco. Cameco Inc. or Cameco US is a wholly owned US subsidiary of Cameco. So, the parent company, Cameco, is a Canadian company. And in 1999, they undertook a restructuring of their entire company, wherein the parent company remained to be the manufacturer and producer of uranium, okay, uranium in Canada. And then they had a distribution arm, a trading arm that was incorporated in Europe. So Luxembourg and then eventually in Switzerland or in Belgium. Basta in Europe yung trading arm nila. And then in the US was the marketing arm. So the marketing arm was the one responsible for looking for new customers. And CEL was the one who was distributing the products that it purchases from its parent. So that's how the structure works. So starting in 1999, CEL entered into uranium purchase agreements with arm's length third parties, and CEL also entered into long-term UPAs with Cameco. So dahil si CEL is a trading company, distributing company, it gets its uranium from third parties, but it also gets its uranium from its parent company, which is the producer or the producer of the uranium. Thereafter, Cameco US purchased uranium from CEL and sold it to third-party customers. So, si Cameco US, as I said, was the marketing arm. Cameco US did not hold inventory and only took flash title to the uranium it sold to third-party customers. And the terms of the sale was this: the price was 2% lower, so that Cameco US earned a 2% resale margin. So that's how Cameco US was earning income. CEL entered into intercompany services agreement with Cameco, where Cameco agreed to provide various services, including uranium contract administration, legal, accounting, and other functions. I think we discussed this, for this entire program. Now, there are instances where the parent was the one providing the service, or so related companies, right? And then one company would provide the services for another company, and then it just gets a fee for the services that it provides. So in this case, it's the parent company that was providing that service to the distribution company. Next. So CEL had one senior employee up to 2006. So according to later on we'll see that according to the tax authority, they didn't have that much manpower. But according to CEL, that was enough for its business because it's only engaged in trading. So yung senior employee nila had extensive experience in the uranium industry, and it hired a second employee also at that time. The CEL employees regularly attended sales meetings held by Cameco US. Actually, if you look at the background of the facts of the case, you will see that every time there was a meeting that was going on with Cameco US or the Cameco Europe, CEL, Cameco parent company was always present. So, interrelated talaga yung meetings nila.
After 2002, there was a significant increase in the market price of uranium. The pricing of the third-party UPAs and Cameco UPA allowed CEL to benefit from the increasing market price of uranium. So, the way that purchases of uranium works, so there are two kinds. You can purchase uranium at spot market prices. If it's spot market prices, it's not like electricity that you would be able to buy per hour. Its spot market price is less than 10 years. Long-term contracts for purchases of uranium is more than 10 years. So, ang nangyari dito, at the time the contract was entered into, the price purchase was low, and then after 2002, there was a windfall because the prices suddenly increased. Okay, so the Canada Revenue Agency, CRA, reassessed Cameco on the basis that CEL's profits should have been realized by Cameco. Basically, nagreklamo si Canada kasi the profits for the uranium increase in prices was realized by the European subsidiary instead of the Canadian company. So that obviously resulted in less taxes for the Canadian government. 3 grounds ang inassert ni CRA. First, it asserted that transfer pricing arrangement was a sham. CRA argued that Cameco transferred its uranium trading business to CEL on paper, but in reality, all important functions and strategic decisions for the uranium trading business continue to be performed by Cameco. So there were evidence introduced by the CRA which showed that emails coming from the parent company directing CEL to sign a particular agreement, the parent company attending the meetings, signing off on, actually they were guaranteeing the loans of CEL. They made a big emphasis about that. Financing agreements, the parent company was always present in those agreements, and in fact, may mga agreements na even if hindi party si parent company dun sa agreement, it was requiring the financier or the financing company to provide notices to it. And then there were also evidence which showed that the budget of CEL and Cameco US were being rationalized and projected by the parent company instead of the subsidiary themselves. And then second, the CRA asserted that the arrangement was not commercially rational and should be recharacterized. I think in this second issue, it was more of a Canadian tax provision interpretation. So we can just skip that. Ang sinasabi nila dito, Cameco negotiated valuable uranium contracts and allowed CEL to enter into those contracts even though Cameco knew the contracts would give rise to economic windfall. Basically, parang may bad faith na alam ni Cameco that when the contracts were entered into, market prices would go up. And it directed its subsidiary to enter into those agreements with a view to that. And then the third issue, the CRA argued that the arrangement should be subject to a price adjustment given that an arm's length party would not agree to terms or conditions that result in any income being earned by CEL. So nandito yung transfer pricing issue sa third, because they're saying that CEL, when it purchased uranium from its parent, the price was too low compared to if CEL purchased uranium from independent parties. So, tungkol dun sa first issue, natalo si Canadian Revenue Authority. The court did not think that the structure, the way that they structured their company, was a sham. Um, the court stated tax motivation does not transform the arrangements into a sham. So it's okay if the parties, one of the considerations of the parties in restructuring their business was to reduce their taxes. So that's what they said. In arguing that the transaction was a sham, CRA asserted that Cameco employees were performing various services for Cameco's account and that control and essential functions of the uranium trading business were undertaken by Cameco. I recall that we were discussing elements of control during the first day. And it seemed to me, when I was reading this case, that all the evidence actually pointed to the fact that the parent company was the one controlling the subsidiaries. But but the court held that there was no such control, and the subsidiaries actually had resources for their operations. Number one, they're just a distribution company, so they don't need a lot of resources. And if nakikialam si parent company sa business ni subsidiary, then that's just normal because they're part of the same group of companies. So the court found there was no evidence to support a conclusion that Cameco was performing services for its own account rather than for the benefit of CEL. The court stated that a corporation may undertake activities through its own employees or through independent contractors acting on its behalf. The example provided by CRA on this point were insignificant and did not support a conclusion that Cameco routinely concluded contracts on behalf of CEL or the conclusion that the overall arrangement was a sham and that the business of CEL should be considered to be the business of Cameco. I guess in legal terms, what they're trying to do is they're piercing the corporate veil, the fiction of corporate veil, because they're saying that the subsidiary is only an alter ego of the parent company. Yeah. But I think in the Philippines, the threshold for that is very, very high. I mean, you have to really show that there is complete 100% control in all aspects, or that it was really entered into in bad faith in order to defraud someone for the alter ego theory to succeed. So in this case, the court did not believe that the transaction was a sham. So the CRA also argued that the overall arrangement, so ito din yun, may deliberate deception daw because appellant was doing everything. So the court held that there was nothing unusual about the way in which the Cameco group operated, noting that it is common for administrative functions to be centralized and shared, for there to be commercial integration across the enterprise, and for the parent to provide cooperation and coordination among the entities. So, pero I think in that case, it could go either way. I guess if it was in another jurisdiction or if it's another court, it may have gone the other way. So on the second issue about recharacterization, the court considered whether it was commercially rational for Cameco to allow CEL to enter into the third-party UPAs. So, ang nangyari kasi, sobrang kumita si CEL after they entered into third-party contracts. Kasi at the time it was entered into, depressed yung prices. And then, at the time that the uranium was going to be delivered and paid for, tumaas yung price. So, the court accepted the view of Cameco's expert that any entity would be willing to give up a business opportunity as long as they are fairly compensated. There is nothing exceptional, unusual, or inappropriate about the appellant, so appellant is the parent company, decision to incorporate CEL and have CEL execute the UPAs. So that behavior is actually a core function of a parent of a multinational enterprise. So there's no problem. The court also found that Cameco's sale of uranium did not meet the first test, citing that the terms and conditions of the UPA were generally consistent with practices in the uranium industry. And then the court also found that the primary purpose of the third-party UPAs was to save tax whereas there was a bona fide profit earning primary purpose in respect of the UPA. Ito yung talagang transfer pricing issue. Sinabi kasi nung tax authority that Cameco knew the third-party UPAs, so that's the purchase agreements, allowed CL were valuable business opportunities, and Cameco should not have allowed CL to earn any more than a routine distributor's return. However, the court found that the third-party UPAs were entered into with third parties and reflected a market-determined value. While there was no doubt that the third-party UPAs afforded CL an opportunity, the court accepted the view that Cameco's expert that the economic benefit of participating in the third-party UPAs was negligible at the time the parties executed the contracts. So, ang sinasabi nila dito kasi yung uranium product, syempre super dependent siya on market prices. Ang weird lang sa the way that the sale of uranium happens is matatagal yung contracts. So more than 10 years yung pagitan. You enter into an agreement now, and it's only after 10 years where you will actually pay the amount or have it delivered kasi long term yung mga contracts nila. So at the time, noong 1999 kasi, mababa kasi yung presyo ng uranium. Remember, may political and economic issues pa nung time na to. There was a nuclear non-proliferation treaty that was executed by Russia with US. Yes. So, biglaan, yung Russian uranium, because they would have to dispose of those uranium, biglang papasok siya ngayon sa market. Because ngayon, dadami yung uranium sa market, syempre, magde-depress yung price kasi dami ng supply. Diba? Limited lang naman yung nuclear power plants in the world. You only have a number of them that purchases the uranium for their operations. So there was that consideration. And at the time when the long-term contract was obligating the parties to actually deliver and pay the products, tumaas na yung price. So, that's why nagkaroon ng malaking kita si CEL. Na ngayon, yes. So, sinasabi ng court na at the time the contracts were entered into, mababa pa rin yung price. There was negligible economic value at that time.
Pero related party sila. Yung nag-execute ng contract.
Yes.
Related
party. So, ganun daw talaga. Ganun daw talaga. Ngayon, kung kumita siya, good for the distributor, hindi naman nila na-expect na ganun kataas yung increase ng price afterwards, correct? So, next issue. CRA took the position that the profit earned by CL from the third-party UPAs and Cameco UPA should be attributed to Cameco because it performed all the critical functions that earned the profit, including marketing and research. CRA's expert report suggests that CL's income should be based on a cost plus or resale minus approach, shifting all the income attributable to uranium price movement to Cameco. So gusto ni CRA obviously na lahat ng income ni CL, kasi siya nga yung kumita ng malaki, ilipat kay parent. Kasi sinasabi niya, si parent naman yung gumagawa ng lahat ng functions. It was the parent who masterminded or orchestrated entering into those contracts. The court held that the evidence established that the services provided by Cameco to CL in support of its purchase and sale activities were routine, commercially available services utilizing non-proprietary information. Further, CL contracted Cameco to perform certain services, and under Canadian law, there is no distinction between a corporation carrying on activities using its own employees versus using independent contractors. The court also rejected the contention that Cameco unilaterally made all decisions regarding the purchase and sale of CL's uranium. CL's workforce had sufficient expertise and was involved in making key decisions regarding purchases and sales. So, hindi naniwala si court, sinasabi niya na magagaling naman yung mga tao ni CL, hindi naman abnormal yung makialam si parent company into the business of CEL, pero it was CEL who entered into those contracts by itself. And this is acceptable. Finally, the court considered the consistency between the legal contracts and economic substance of the arrangement.
Diba? Yan na naman.
Oo, ito nga yung sa Russia, US, whatever. The court found that CEL had contractually assumed price risk by entering into the third parties, UPAs and Cameco UPA. So, sa totoo naman, when CEL entered into the contracts, bababa yung price. Pero what if bumaba pala yung price after 10 years? E di lugi siya. So, yung risk, nasa kanya. Hindi naman nasa parent. So, in respect of the Cameco UPA, the court accepted an application of the comparable uncontrolled price method in determining the price charge by Cameco to CEL for uranium delivered were well within the arm's length range. So, there was no evidence warranting a price adjustment. Ang ginamit nila dito is the cup method. Next.
Isang product ng uranium.
Opo, uranium. So, kumuha lang ako ng short table because the case made reference to a report, a transfer pricing report by Ms. Dr. Horst. So, ang methodology na ginamit ni Dr. Horst for this case, kasi ang isang issue
siya sa transfer pricing.
kilala siya. So,
Especially Canada, kung meron yung transfer pricing na Canada. In fact, sa Canada yung taxes mo yung 9 days.
oh, I see. Okay. Actually, marami nga silang witness. Ang daming doctors.
Sobra.
Ang daming doctors. Meron na yung Dr. Shapiro na I wouldn't think though it was the economic Carl Shapiro pero but anyway. So, dito kasi si CEL, the distributor, was purchasing uranium from the parent. So, the issue there was, tama ba yung price? Arm's length price ba yung charge? So, sabi ni Dr. Horst, ang ginamit niyang methodology is the comparable uncontrolled price method, and then ginamit rin yung resale price method to check the results of the CUP method. So, dalawa yung ginamit. Ang reason niya for doing that, sabi niya, is although traditional transaction methods are ideally applied to separate transactions, they can also be applied to bundled related transactions, example of which is a long-term contract for the supply of commodities or service. So in this case, this is a long-term supply of uranium. Availability of comparable third-party agreements allow a reliable application of the CUP method and a test of its reasonableness using the RPM. So, dahil there were comparable third-party agreements, because at this time, CEL was also purchasing uranium, not just from its parent, but also from third parties. There were sources of evidence that he can use in order to compare the two. So, sabi niya, what are the key elements of the contracts that were important for him? Number one is the valuation date of the agreement. Number two, minimum and maximum deliveries to be made. Kasi nga, sobrang complicated, I think, ng contracts nila. There were, because it's a long-term contract, and then there were floor prices, there were minimum and maximum quantities that can be delivered depending on your needs at the time, staggered over that period. And then they have specific formulas for calculating the prices for deliveries made each year covered by the agreement. So there were 5 different kinds of formula that can be used. There's fixed price, base price, hybrid price, market price, cap market price. And then, of course, you have to take into consideration now the duration of the agreement and also the level of the market. So, what do you mean by level of the market? It means the difference between purchases by a nuclear power plant operator, other end user of the uranium product, and those by a distributor that is purchasing in large volume for ultimate resale. So, depende kasi din, kung kanino niya kasi binibenta. So, iba kasi yung quantities if you're selling to a nuclear power plant, syempre mas malaki yun. Otherwise, magbebenta ka to a reseller that will sell to small quantities. So you take that into consideration, and then ito yung comparables criteria na ginamit niya. So there were 3. He said that the criteria that he used was, number 1, the comparable third-party contract was negotiated in the same 3-year period as the long-term contracts in question. So the negotiation should take place during the same time frame. Second, there were available copies of the agreement and any amendments negotiated before the end of 2001. And then 3, the pricing formula under the third-party contract relied on was one of those 5 that was mentioned. So, any application? Actually, mahaba siya. So, meron siyang 3 stages of the cup method na ginawa. And then yung 4th one, ginawa niya yung RPM analysis to check the results of the 3. So, yung first kasi, ito yung pinaka-simple. Yung first, kinumpare lang niya yung actual transfer price in 2003, 2005, and 2006 versus kung ano yung actual price na binayad ni CEL to the independent purchasers. So, kinumpare lang niya yung dalawa. Pero, ginamit niya yung base price discount factors to adjust for differences in the dates. Kasi syempre, iba yung, may mga ibang parameters dun sa contracts, di ba? So, they have to account for that to make it, ano tawag mo sa economic terms? Para apples to apples yung comparison. So, in-adjust niya yung differences in the dates, market, and pricing formulas. Yun. Yung second, kinumpare niya yung forecasted transfer price CL paid to or received from CCO, the parent company, over the life of the long-term agreement versus the forecasted prices CL, Kojima, and Nukem paid to third-party suppliers over the entire duration of their comparable long-term agreement. So I think this is not, the second one is not per transaction, but the prices over the lifetime of those agreements. Kinumpare niya with comparable agreements.
Present value, no?
Tapos yung third, hindi ko na ito naiintindihan kasi may reliance daw on weighted price discount factors. So I think that should be able to explain, but I can't. Yeah. To provide benchmark prices for comparing effective contract prices. Okay. So next. So there was there were 3 witnesses, doctors also, that provided criticisms of the approach of Dr. Horst. Number 1, sinasabi nila na hindi naman comparable, mali naman yung pagpili mo ng comparables. Kasi sabi niya, kahit, yes, while the contracts are similar in form, the economic circumstances are materially different. Because when CEL bought the contract from its parent company, yun na yun, di ba? So, bilateral negotiations. But you compared it with another company, which is 10X, which is the comparable. Kaya lang si 10X was under pressure at that time to sell the Russian uranium. So, kasi nag-enter into an agreement kasi si 10X. Yes, the economic conditions were not the same. So, yung bargaining power ni 10X was very weak compared to other players in the market. So, why would you use 10X as a benchmark? And then, another issue was substantial and durable losses mandate closer scrutiny. Because I think the parent company recorded a lot of losses. So, sinasabi niya na this is contrary to the principle that prices are arm's length. If prices are judged to promote the interests of the parent viewed as an unrelated party. Kasi they would have demanded higher.
That's why hindi siya upset.
Yes. Yun yung criticism nila kay Dr. Horst. So, ayun, ignores the parent's economic incentives and available options. Sinabi niya, the parent can actually sell to other distributors. It had other options, so therefore it could have commanded a higher price. So, yun. And so, marami pang ibang criticisms. And there were also rebuttals. But ang maganda lang dito sa case na to, you would be able to see how all those factors that we discussed on taking into consideration how to make a transfer pricing analysis comes into play. Yeah, it's there. And you can see the criticisms and also the rebuttals of the other experts on that transfer pricing report. So you can read the case. It's available here. And I can also share the PowerPoint because there's criticisms and then the next slide were our rebuttals. Yeah. So thank you for